Welcome to the deep dive. We take a stack of sources, plunge right in, and try to surface with the essential knowledge you need.
That's the plan.
Today, we're taking a deep, pretty unflinching look into the experiences and mindset of David Goggins. We're pulling insights directly from his own account. The source material can't hurt me.
Yeah, that's right. And what we have here is, well, it's a powerful, really raw firsthand narrative.
Yeah.
It takes us from a childhood marked by, intense suffering,
Mm-hmm.
all the way through the most demanding military training out there. Think Navy SEALs, Army Rangers,
Right.
and then into the just brutal world of ultra-endurance sports. It's really a story about pushing the absolute limits of, human capability.
And it really doesn't hold back, does it? So our mission in this deep dive is basically to unpack the core lessons, the mindsets, the very specific tools Goggins actually describes using to transform pain and adversity into power. We want to understand, based only on this source material, how he built what he calls a calloused mind. And what, if anything, you might be able to take from that process for your own life, your own challenges. Yet we're exploring his perspective, his journey.
Yeah.
We're not endorsing it as the only way, but really trying to understand this remarkable path he lays out.
Exactly. It's about getting to grips with the how and the why of his, extraordinary transformation, drawing directly from the experiences detailed right here in these pages.
Okay, so let's get into it. The source material kicks off with this picture that feels almost intentionally jarring. It sets the scene in Williamsville, New York, back in 1981. And Goggins describes it as this picture-perfect suburban town, calls it the tastiest real estate in Buffalo. He paints this image of a place that was leafy and friendly with safe streets and these, dainty homes filled with model citizens.
Sounds ideal.
Totally. You hear about doctors, lawyers, even pro football players living there. It sounds like the absolute epitome of the American dream.
But then almost immediately there's this striking contrast. He tells us that he and his family found hell right there on a corner lot on Paradise Road. That immediate juxtaposition is incredibly powerful. It just highlights the huge difference between the outward appearance of this ideal suburban life and the hidden reality he was actually living.
Inside their home and their business, yeah. And that hidden reality really centered around Skateland, right? The roller rink his father, Trunis, owned.
That's it, Skateland.
From the outside, it was presented as this sort of idyllic, family-owned and operated dream cloud.
Yeah.
People came to skate, enjoy the music. His dad spun disco, funk.
Right. He mentioned some pretty big names passing through, too.
He does. Celebrities like Rick James, O.J. Simpson, Teddy Pendergrass, Sister Sledge. It adds this weird kind of surreal layer to the whole environment.
But the source immediately pulls that curtain back. Inside, it was anything but idyllic. Goggins, incredibly, was just 6 years old. It's already working, managing the skate rental station, needing a step stool just to be seen over the counter. His mother worked as the sole cashier. And the crucial detail here, the really stark one, is that every single cent that came in belonged exclusively to his father. Goggins writes it directly. The rest of us never earned a cent for our sweat.
Wow. And that control went way beyond just their labor, didn't it? His mother had absolutely zero financial independence.
None. No bank account or credit cards in her name. His father controlled everything. And there was this constant crushing fear about what would happen if her cash drawer was short, even by a little bit.
Yeah, the source makes it really plain. This financial stranglehold meant she was, quote, 100% dependent, basically trapped. Because, she wanted to leave, she'd have to walk with nothing at all.
And that fear wasn't just financial. It was deeply rooted in physical violence at home, too. Sleep itself was difficult because their office, where they sometimes slept, was directly below the dance floor.
Right, the noise.
The constant noise, the vibration from above, made it hard to rest. He describes a typical night where his father comes in sloppy and annoyed. And this is where you get one of the most shocking details from the source, I think.
That's one.
He recounts his father pulling a loaded pistol from beneath the cushion where the 6-year-old Goggins was sleeping.
Oh, my God. A loaded gun.
A loaded gun placed right there next to where a child slept.
Just picturing that, it's such a visceral detail. It instantly tells you the level of danger and just constant fear he must have grown up with. He details the beatings, too, that they were commonplace. Describes one specific instance where his father started swinging his belt, and he instinctively curled into a ball to protect himself. Just instinct.
And his mother, in that moment, she actually pressed the panic button. The alarm blared. The police actually arrived. You'd expect, help, some kind of intervention.
Yeah, finally.
But the source paints this chilling picture of what happened next. His father met the police, who glanced past him at his mother, whose face was apparently swollen and caked with dried blood.
Jeez.
But, as Goggins observes with this painful clarity, those were different days. There was no hashtag #MeToo back then. That shit didn't exist, and they ignored her. His father just dismissed it as necessary domestic discipline,
Unbelievable.
and the police accepted it and left. Just like that.
That really highlights the systemic failure, doesn't it? The lack of protection for his mother, for the kids. It just solidifies that sense of being trapped, living in constant fear.
Yeah.
The source also contrasts his reaction to all this with his older brother, Trinus Jr.
Right. Trinus Jr., he feared their father, sure, but also seemed to kind of worship the man and was under his spell. He was the firstborn, treated maybe marginally better, and would often just wait out the beatings in his room, choosing to sort of ignore the darkness unfolding.
But Goggins says something really key here. I always paid close fucking attention. He wasn't ignoring it. He was absorbing all the dynamics of fear, control, violence.
He remembers his father telling Trinus Jr., "When you grow up, I'm going to want to see you be the man of his house," revealing this desire to pass on this really disturbing legacy.
So eventually the escape, his mother makes the incredibly difficult decision to leave. And even that flight sounds desperate.
Oh, absolutely. Driving through the night, their car broke down at a gas station near Erie, Pennsylvania. His mother became hysterical, just overwhelmed, calling her friend Betty, saying, "I can't do this, Betty. I have to go back."
Wow. At breaking point.
Totally. But Betty remained calm, practical, gave her clear instructions: find an attendant for the car, get oil, find a hotel in Erie, go to the Volvo dealer in the morning. His mother's response just, "Yeah, okay, hotel, Volvo dealer."
Got it.
Yeah.
It shows just how emotionally spent she was, barely processing.
They arrived at the Holiday Inn looking like they'd lost everything, carrying clothes in black trash bags, only to find it was fully booked. The night manager, seeing their desperate state, offered them rollaway beds in the conference room. Goggins calls it their personal purgatory. And his mother stayed awake all night, watching their bikes, watching the road, terrified that his father might follow them. This desperate flight from violence is just... It's such a crucial piece of the foundation, isn't it? A defining moment that shaped his early understanding of suffering and, well, survival.
Definitely. So they find this precarious safety in Indiana, away from the immediate threat.
Yeah.
But as the source describes, the financial struggle just continued.
Yeah, they were literally counting change on the floor to pay bills, buy groceries, get something simple like burgers from Hardee's. His mother also clearly missed his brother, who had stayed behind.
And while Goggins initially seemed to adapt, making friends, no longer wetting the bed, he writes this really telling line: "My demons weren't gone. They were dormant. And when they came back, they hit hard."
That period, he suggests, became the sort of incubator for the post-traumatic stress he was carrying.
And school, which he says had previously felt like a safe harbor, actually transformed into a torture chamber for him.
Yeah, he attributes this shift significantly to one specific teacher, Mrs. D. Her frustration with him led her to yell, sometimes getting her face just inches from my own. Goggins reflects that she had no idea the Pandora's box she was tearing open with that kind of behavior, unknowingly triggering his past trauma.
The school administration initially sided with Mrs. D, but his mother fought hard to keep him enrolled. This led to mandated speech therapy and group therapy with a shrink.
But Goggins quickly dismissed the group therapy, thinking, these boys are crazy.
Yeah.
And his mother, maybe seeing his resistance, agreed to let him stop.
The source touches on the idea here that while, evidence-based interventions existed for the effects of toxic stress, Mrs. D, like maybe a lot of educators back then, just didn't have that knowledge.
Yeah, right. It contrasts her approach with that of Sister Catherine, a teacher who came later. Sister Catherine had high expectations, but focused on understanding how he learned, operating from the belief that everybody learns in a different way, and we're going to figure out how you learn. That stark contrast really highlights how crucial the right educational environment and approach can be, especially for a traumatized kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Academically, though, Goggins freely admits he was basically an academic fraud.
He says it straight up.
Yeah, he hacked his way through school by cheating and copying. Despite this, his athletic ability kind of shone through, and he even made the freshman basketball team at Cathedral, which was a top school in the state, starting at point guard. Must have been a strange mix, right? External validation from sports, but internally knowing his academic struggles.
Definitely. His mom eventually pulled him out of Cathedral because of the cost, and he transferred to North Central High, a much larger public school. He describes arriving there feeling completely out of place, looking like a preppy-ass white boy, tight jeans, collared shirt tucked in, feeling very insecure.
And basketball, again, was his only saving grace initially.
Yeah. He talks about projecting this image, saying he looked different enough on the outside to perpetuate an illusion that I'd changed, but internally he knew he hadn't done a shred of that hard work, needed to actually deal with his past trauma and those deep-seated insecurities. He admits, still a dumb kid with nothing solid to lean on.
And this internal insecurity kind of manifested in social friction, especially in basketball. He picked up this really aggressive style of trash talking in Indianapolis, getting personal, even researching insults.
He calls himself the Draymond Green of his school team.
Right. But when they played in Brazil, this behavior totally backfired. It embarrassed the coaches. They took the ball away, put him in the front court, basically forced him to shut up. An early lesson, maybe, in how that external projection could cost him.
Definitely. And then another profound trauma struck. The sudden death of Wilmoth Irving, his mother's boyfriend.
Yeah. They were planning to move in with him in Indianapolis the following summer. Wilmoth died the day after Christmas, 1989, just 43 years old. His father actually found the body in the garage.
His grandmother delivered the news to Goggins. His immediate reaction was just this physical outburst of rage. He punched the refrigerator and left a dent.
Wow.
His mother was frantic, calling Wilmoth's house, eventually reaching a detective. She initially couldn't believe it, thought it was some kind of horrible prank.
Understandable.
Until the detective confirmed it, and she remembered Wilmoth had actually been shot months earlier. The source mentioned speculation, a secret street life, maybe a shady business deal or a drug deal gone bad, though the police apparently never released the motive.
The scene when they arrived at Wilmoth's house is described with such haunting detail. Cordons off with yellow police tape, which Goggins grimly compares to a fucked-up Christmas gift.
Yeah.
His mother and he ducked under the tape to get to the door, and he saw the cold blood was still pooled on the garage floor.
Just horrible. And the most disturbing part of that memory, he says, he was a 14-year-old wandering through an active crime scene, but nobody, not my mother, not Wilmoth's family, and not even the police seemed disturbed by me being there, absorbing the heavy vibe of my would-be stepfather's murder.
That unsupervised exposure to such a brutal reality at that age without any apparent intervention.
Yeah.
It must have been incredibly impactful, just adding another layer to the trauma he was already carrying.
No doubt. The source also includes this stark account of direct racial prejudice he experienced.
Oh, yeah? In Brazil?
Right. Walking with his brother, a pickup truck full of teenagers yelled niggers at them. When they didn't react, the way the teenagers expected, the truck stopped. A teenager got out and aimed a pistol directly at Goggins' head. They just kept their heads down and kept walking. He reflects on this later, connecting it to the uncomfortable truth he feels many people refuse to acknowledge that racism and bigotry still exist, and they lack the balls to hear it.
Academically, meanwhile, things weren't improving. He details his sophomore year strategy. Hiding in the back, slumping in his chair, just sidestepping through class.
The foreign language requirement was a huge obstacle because, as he puts it, he could barely read English in the first place. He concludes that after a good 8 years of cheating, his ignorance had crystallized. He thought he was fooling the system, but really he'd been gaming myself.
This pattern of avoiding challenges, externalizing problems, it led him to move out of his mom's place. He was crashing with friends, feeling cocky, thinking he didn't need her support.
That lasted about a week and a half, until the money ran out.
Right. This whole period just shows someone drifting, right? Accumulating unresolved issues, no clear direction, no tools to confront his reality.
And it's this state, this drift, and the mounting consequences that leads directly to what the source describes as his turning point.
Yeah, the big shift. His mom called him at a friend's house, her voice not angry, but just weary.
Exhausted, yeah.
She told him about a letter from school detailing his terrible attendance missing over a quarter of the year and a D average. The letter basically warned he wouldn't graduate without significant improvement.
And the pivotal moment itself happened spontaneously later that night in the shower. He describes it so vividly. Steam billowed all around me. It rippled off my skin and poured from my soul. It wasn't just physical. It was, as he calls it, his solo intervention.
A solo intervention. I like that.
Yeah. He started talking to himself, confronting his situation with just brutal honesty. It's on you, he said. Yeah, I know shit is fucked up. I know what you've been through. I was there, bitch. Merry fucking Christmas. Nobody is coming to save your ass. Not your mommy, not Wilmeth. Nobody. It's up to you.
Wow. That's intense self-talk.
Incredibly intense. And that moment of radical self-confrontation was the origin of what he would later call the accountability mirror. For the first time, he writes, he held himself accountable.
And it wasn't just a one-off thing, right? He describes it becoming a new ritual that stayed with him for years. This brutal, honest self-assessment, he says, that was the fuel that drove him to get my grades up, whip my sorry ass into shape, and see me through graduation and into the Air Force.
This experience is directly linked to the chapter title, Truth Hurts. The source reflects on how difficult it is, personally and culturally, to face and speak hard truths. He circles back to the point about racism and bigotry, arguing that people lack the balls to hear it.
And he delivers this direct challenge to the listener, using a really blunt example. If you've spent 30 years hating your job out of fear, you've been living like a pussy. Period. Point blank. Tell yourself the truth. That uncompromising bluntness, born from his own self-intervention, it's such a core takeaway from this moment.
Definitely. And this leads right into challenge #2 presented in the source, the accountability mirror. He instructs you to do this physically post-it notes on an actual mirror, not, digital notes on your phone.
Right, tangible. The purpose is to be raw and real, to abolish the ego. It's explicitly not a self-love tactic.
Yeah.
You write down your insecurities, your dreams, your goals, and he gives examples of the initial kind of unkind things you might need to tell yourself. You aren't smart enough, you're freaking fat.
Yeah, it's harsh, but the idea is that this level of brutal honesty, confronting your shortcomings head on, it's uncomfortable but necessary to start building thicker skin to improve in life. This turning point fundamentally shifts his focus from blaming everything else to this internal, radical responsibility.
So with this new commitment to accountability, he sets his sights on a military path, specifically aiming for the Air Force with aspirations of joining a pararescue unit. PJ dreams.
Right. But the reality initially was far less glamorous. He ended up baiting rat traps.
Rat traps, seriously.
Yeah, describing the little green boxes and finding rat carcasses. Quite a departure from those high-flying dreams he had.
Definitely a contrast.
Yeah.
And during his time in the Air Force and immediately after, he experienced significant weight gain.
A huge weight gain. He went from 175 pounds at 19 to nearly 300 pounds by the time he was discharged. And he continued to bulk up with both muscle and fat afterwards. He offers the surprising explanation for it.
Yeah, what was that?
He says wanting to be big hid David Goggins. He could literally tuck the memory or the feeling of that smaller, insecure, 175-pound kid into those 21-inch biceps and that flabby belly.
Wow, that's insightful.
Isn't it? He describes the physical discomfort, too, having to sew an athletic sock into the crotch of my work pants so they wouldn't split when I dropped to one knee. He refers to himself as a sorry fucking sight.
And crucially, this physical state was totally intertwined with how he felt inside. He writes, I knew I was a pussy, and that's a haunting feeling.
Yeah.
The weight wasn't just physical. It was like the manifestation of all these unresolved issues and insecurities.
Exactly. The spark for his next, even more ambitious goal came unexpectedly. He was slumped on his sofa after a failed attempt at running, just feeling like a complete failure, when a TV program caught his attention, a documentary about Navy SEAL training, specifically BUD Hell Week.
And he describes seeing these men looking absolutely wrecked, swollen, chafed, sleep-deprived, and dead on their feet.
But instead of being repulsed,
He felt jealous of their suffering, despite how awful they looked.
that's the wild part. He had this profound realization that that level of extreme challenge was exactly what he wanted, what he felt he needed.
Yeah. So he started calling recruiting offices, eventually connecting with Petty Officer Stephen Shaljo in Indianapolis, a recruiter who seemed, different. Shaljo apparently sensed Goggins' underlying drive immediately.
And Shaljo laid out this immense challenge. Goggins had less than 3 months to lose 106 pounds to meet the weight requirement for BUDS.
Which sounds impossible.
Totally impossible. This goal felt so daunting that he didn't immediately quit his pest control job, acknowledging just how hard the task ahead was, plus the need to pass the ASVAB test again. Yes, the ASVAB. Another hurdle. The score needed for BUDS was significantly higher than what he'd needed for the Air Force, a 50 in mechanical comprehension compared to his previous 44. He described studying intensely all day and zapped pests each night for 2 weeks leading up to the test.
But the real catalyst, the thing that really pushed him over the edge, came after failing that second ASVAB attempt. He describes being on this disastrous pest control job in a restaurant.
Right, the roaches.
Yeah, encountering dead rodents, spraying, seeing cockroaches scatter everywhere. This moment brought on this crushing wave of feeling like a total failure, believing he was born nothing, I'd proven nothing, and I still wasn't worth a damn thing. He was, he writes, on the absolute verge of giving up completely.
And in that moment of pure despair, he found what he calls a much-needed dose of divine intervention.
Okay.
He found his old VHS copy of Rocky. Fast-forwarded to round 14. He describes watching the scene where Rocky gets knocked down. Mickey's telling him to stay down, but Rocky somehow gets back to his feet at the 10 count, leaving Apollo Creed just stunned.
Ah, that scene. Yeah.
That image, that act of pure refusal to quit against impossible odds, it served as this profound inspiration for him.
So the Rocky scene spurred immediate, decisive action. He dumped the protein shake he was about to drink, ate steak and eggs, went straight to the gym. This was the start of his intense, rapid weight loss and training regimen.
He was fanatical, weighing himself twice daily, managed to drop 25 pounds in just 2 weeks, hit 250 pounds 10 days after that.
Incredible speed.
Yeah. He implemented this brutal daily training schedule: stationary bike, pool work, gym sessions, incorporating runs. He specifically mentions ditching standard running shoes for Bates Lights boots, the same gear SEAL candidates wear.
Running in boots, ouch.
And running in them through the harsh Indiana winter. He pushed himself to double the required BUDS workouts, running 6 miles, cycling 20, swimming 2 miles every single day. This incredible level of self-discipline forged in that shower intervention was driven by his stated desire to be the best.
The pressure must have been immense for that third ASVAB attempt.
Oh yeah. He urgently asked Shaljo for the score immediately after the test. Shaljo initially refused, citing the system, but Goggins' plea, "Sir, you have no idea what this test means to me, to my life, it's everything," persuaded him. Shaljo broke the rules, telling Goggins, "I'm breaking every rule in the book right now," and delivered the news. A 65 overall and the crucial 50 were needed.
What was his reaction?
A visceral FAQ.
Yeah.
He called his mom, who'd witnessed his intense transformation, sharing the news through tears. Shaljo called the next day, confirming he was approved for BGS in the Naval Reserves.
But this achievement brought a really difficult personal crossroad, didn't it? His wife, Pam, and her father.
Right. They presented him with what he describes as an implied ultimatum. He had to choose: give up this opportunity to become a SEAL and save his marriage, or pursue the goal and face divorce.
That's a heavy choice.
Huge. He reflects that his final decision didn't have anything to do with my feelings for Pam or her father. It was about who I was and who I wanted to be. He felt like a prisoner in my own mind, and this opportunity was my only chance to break free. This radical pursuit of self-transformation was just a higher priority for him than maintaining the status quo of his personal life.
So he makes the choice, goes through the extreme weight loss, the training, passes the test, and arrives at Coronado for BEDS. He describes the immediate introduction to suffering, meeting instructors like Psycho Pete.
Psycho Pete, yeah. The physical punishment was relentless from the moment he got there. Constant cycles of push-ups, sit-ups, flutter kicks, lunges, dive bombers.
Standard stuff, but dialed up.
Dialed way up, all interspersed with freezing water hose downs while the instructors were, as he puts it, cackling the whole damn time.
Right. But Hell Week, that's described as a distinct level of suffering, isn't it? Occurring in the 3rd week.
Yeah, 130 hours straight. Unbroken. It's designed to go way beyond the physical. Its explicit purpose, he explains, is to reveal your heart and character. And maybe most importantly, more than anything, it reveals your mindset.
And while a lot of the training happens on Coronado Island, Goggins had this particular relationship with the grinder, right? That asphalt slab for PT.
Yeah, he calls it the slab of agony he wanted because he needed to know whether or not I had what it took to belong.
Psycho Pete wasn't just about physical pain, though. He employed psychological warfare.
Oh, yeah. Threats like, "Oh, and you will quit, and I'll make sure of that." Delivered sometimes calmly, sometimes screaming inches from his face with eyes that went dark. Just pure intimidation.
In the middle of all this, he found a crucial connection with Bill Freak Brown.
Freak Brown. Goggins describes him as almost a mirror image, the white version of David Goggins, with a similarly tough background, bullied for a cleft palate, time in youth detention. Brown also overcame a significant challenge himself, teaching himself to swim after failing the SEAL swim test 3 times initially.
Wow, so they kind of bonded over that shared sense of being overlooked or having chips on their shoulders.
Exactly. They made a conscious decision to be the pillars of Boat Crew 2, taking the front position on the boat during carrying drills where it's heaviest. Goggins recalls shouting, "Freak Brown, we will be the pillars of Boat Crew 2."
Huh. Taking the hard spot. And they pushed the pace relentlessly, right? Especially during those grueling sand runs where Psycho Pete tried to lose them.
Over more than 4 miles, yeah.
Mhm.
Boat Crew 2 stuck to his damn heels, mirroring his movements, refusing to give him the satisfaction of dropping them. Goggins states proudly, "He may have smoked everybody else, but he did not smoke Boat Crew 2."
Hell Week, for Goggins, was transformative. He felt it revealed an inner beast, leaving him feeling unbreakable. Though, tellingly, the source adds that brief, almost ominous foreshadowing, if only.
If only, yeah. Because Hell Week took a significant physical toll. He talks about needing Toradol shots in his knee due to swelling. A paddling drill injury was particularly difficult. Wounded knee, boots, vest. He confesses he couldn't swim for shit.
And describes flailing, swallowing water, feeling his fear magnify. Yet despite this, he dug deep, led from the front of the boat, coughing up salt water, but setting an example for his crew. That's how you lead from the motherfucking front, he says.
But the injury was severe enough that, after surviving that first Hell Week, he had to be rolled back to a later class.
Yeah, he was in bad shape, coughing up brown knots of mucus, struggling to breathe or move, unable to bend his knee, and the consequence of accepting another rollback was enduring another Hell Week. He notes that the experience, like a brand, left its mark, saying, "The devil branded me too," during that first Hell Week.
He also had to confront and overcome his fear of water again during subsequent phases of training, the underwater knot tying drill.
Oh yeah, in the 15-foot pool section, that was a specific challenge. They were negatively buoyant, had to tread water while tying complex knots. Nothing like Boy Scouts, as he says.
Not quite. He recalls mock rescues, 50-meter underwater swim tests, noting that successfully navigating these difficult underwater evolutions taught them to remain calm, cool, and collected underwater. Essential skill.
And it's here, amidst the intense physical and psychological pressure of BUDS, that the concept of the calloused mind is explicitly introduced and explored.
Right. He uses that analogy of hands building calluses from gripping steel in the gym, repeated stress and hardship, whether it's abuse, bullying, failures, disappointments. It builds a callus on the mind.
That's a powerful image. But he distinguishes between two types of mental callus, doesn't he?
He does. There's the callus of resentment, which, he says, makes you feel like a victim, cautious, untrusting, angry, fearful of change, hard to reach. And then there's the callus built through fighting, through actively confronting challenges.
Okay.
The latter means remaining open, willing to fight for your own life, withstand pain hailstorms, and using that experience to callous over victims' mentality. It's about shedding layers of sweat and hard fucking flesh.
He describes applying this in the pool during that knot-tying drill against Psycho Pete. Instead of panicking from the cold and the pressure, he chose to smile back, feeling energized.
Yeah, the pain, he writes, seemed to fade as he focused. He stayed under, deliberately taking his time tying the knot correctly, while Psycho Pete, watching him, was gasping for air above the surface. He calls this moment a major battle won in the water.
After surviving Hell Week, he describes this palpable shift in attitude among those who remained. They realized a human is capable of much more than you know, and that the experience opens your mind to the true possibilities.
They no longer feared the cold water or the endless push-ups because they knew, as he puts it, no matter what they do to you, they will never break you.
And this translated to a change in behavior. They weren't rushing to meet arbitrary deadlines the instructor set. They just accepted the beatdowns that followed with this attitude of, so the fuck be it.
Goggins notes the instructors didn't really like this newfound lack of fear, took away some of their power, maybe.
Probably. He explains how managing pain during maximum physical effort, or really any maximum effort, can unlock a sympathetic response, that adrenaline boost that allows you to push even harder.
Right. He connects this to overcoming self-doubt, which he suggests might be partly due to our fucked up evolutionary wiring that favors safety. The core choice in these moments is always fight over flight.
Physical training, he argues, is the perfect crucible for developing this calloused mind. It requires single-pointed focus, gives immediate measurable feedback to stress and pain.
And forces you to push hardest precisely when your mind is screaming for you to quit, doing your best work when you are least motivated, That's key to this process. He came to love PT and BUDS because it felt like strengthening his mind for life itself.
But this path of extreme physical endurance came at a significant cost after his second Hell Week.
Second, and he mentions enduring a third one later after getting rolled back twice.
Right. After the second one, he was back on crutches with shin fractures, unable to bend his ankle. He points out the scale of the physical stress in BUDS, up to 60 miles of running per week, and acknowledges he was fucked by every conceivable metric.
He recounts seeing guys who quit Hell Week at the med check, feeling some pity for them, but also reminding himself that failure is a part of life. He describes witnessing Sean Dobbs quit in particular detail.
Oh yeah, what happened there?
Dobbs was complaining about his feet, but his boots looked fine, and he had this blank stare, what Goggins calls the surrendered soul look. Goggins writes he knew Dobbs was going to quit before it happened. He saw Dobbs get into an instructor's warm truck after the instructor announced it would be the coldest night of Hell Week, and later heard the bell toll 3 times, signifying a quit. That experience of seeing someone surrender in that specific way clearly left a lasting impression.
Yeah, you can see how it would. The source touches on the demanding nature of special operations work, stating it requires a certain level of callousness.
To live in a brutal world, you have to accept cold-blooded truths. He acknowledges this isn't necessarily a positive trait or something to be proud of in other contexts, but in that specific world, it was deemed necessary.
His third Hell Week was actually shortened to 36 hours, and only 25 out of 156 men finished. He was injured again, crutches, shin fractures, but pushed through the shortened walk week that followed. Enduring multiple cycles of Hell Week, pushing through constant physical breakdowns, it just became integral to his ongoing process of callousing his mind.
So, with the intense challenges of BUDS seemingly behind him, what does he do? Immediately seeks new levels of suffering.
Of course. He describes Googling the toughest foot races and discovering the Badwater 135.
Badwater. He calls it the ultramarathoner's ultramarathon. Running 135 miles through Death Valley in late July, literally the hottest place on Earth, and finishing at the Mount Whitney portal at over 8,000 feet. Just insane conditions.
Seeing images of this race, he writes, terrified and thrilled him. It immediately reminded him of Hell Week.
And he decided to run it not just as a personal challenge, but with a higher purpose. Raising money for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, supporting the children left behind after the Operation Red Wings tragedy.
Right, where a helicopter crash killed 8 Special Operations warriors, leaving 17 children fatherless.
Yeah.
A powerful motivator.
Huge. He called the race director, Chris Kosman, who was understandably skeptical given Goggins had 0 ultra-running experience.
None at all.
Nope. Kosman gave him this sarcastic challenge. Go run 100 miles that very weekend at the San Diego one-day race and get back to me. Goggins recognizes this as a crucial moment, stating that Kosman made him by pushing him beyond just meeting minimum qualifications.
So Goggins shows up to the San Diego one-day race having done no specific ultra training whatsoever.
None. He describes feeling completely out of place, like a fucking linebacker from the Raiders surrounded by skinny-ass college professor-looking fucking granola-eating weirdos.
Yeah.
Huh. You can picture it. The race was brutal, obviously. At mile 70, he hit a complete physical and mental breakdown. Sat down, head in his hands, feeling his dream of qualifying for Badwater just slipping away.
His crew chief, Kate, played a critical role here, helped him lace his shoes, simply refused to quit on him. But at mile 81, Kate gave him this honest, tough assessment. I don't believe you're going to make the time at this pace.
Ouch. Tough love.
Yeah. He describes his state at that moment, mucus and myoplex dripping, life drained, choking and coughing, just absolutely depleted.
And this moment of absolute failure, hitting a wall harder than ever before, this is where he formalized the cookie jar concept.
Exactly. He describes it as this mental tool, using past successes, no matter how big or small, to fuel present effort when shit gets real.
He gives relatable examples too, right? Like the feeling of accomplishment from understanding a complex paragraph when you're struggling to read.
Or the small victory of losing the first 5 pounds towards a goal of losing 100. The key, he emphasizes, isn't just acknowledging the big victories, but savoring the small ones and being able to draw on them in the heat of battle when shit gets real, to push through exhaustion, depression, pain, misery.
Using these memories to spark small fires to become the motherfucking inferno. Love that line.
It's powerful. He describes the aftermath of the San Diego race, a scare with kidney failure, ending up in the hospital. But he refused pain medication so he could fully feel the intense, gratifying pain of what he had accomplished.
He wanted to feel it.
Yeah, he felt it was his greatest achievement so far, even harder than Hell Week, more significant than becoming a SEAL, more challenging than his Iraq deployment because he had done this himself, pushed himself to this limit.
Wow. This experience really solidified his belief that failure isn't an endpoint, it's a stepping stone. He applied the military AAR after-action report process to his failed attempt.
Right. Dissecting his performance, analyzing his thought process, making a list of concrete fixes. He challenges the listener to do the same with their own failures, analyze them brutally, identify the lessons, and immediately schedule another attempt. Don't wallow.
This section also implicitly reinforces that 40% rule idea mentioned elsewhere in his philosophy.
Definitely. The idea that when your mind tells you you're done, you're only at about 40% of your actual capacity. His ability to keep going in San Diego, despite his body screaming stop, was a prime example of pushing far beyond that perceived limit.
The source states that temptation to quit or sell yourself short is driven by the mind's instinct for comfort and status quo, not growth.
And this software update to quiet the mind's governor takes time. He says it took him 20 years to gain 20 years of experience and requires callousing the mind day after day, actively chasing pain like it's your damn job.
So for his second attempt to qualify for Badwater, Goggins knew he needed to make his application bulletproof after Kosman's initial skepticism.
Yeah, he describes simulating the extreme conditions of Death Valley heat training indoors on an elliptical in 5 layers of clothes, keeping his heart rate at 170 for 2 hours, rowing 30,000 meters. Just brutal prep.
He highlights the loneliness of this intense solitary training, but notes that his old BUDS instructor, SBG, fucking loved it, recognizing the extreme dedication.
This level of preparation, he explains, wasn't just about physical readiness. It was about stifling the quitting mind before it could even gain traction, using the cookie jar to convince himself he was somehow immune to suffering, mental warfare on himself.
During the Badwater race itself, he recounts starting slowly, mostly walking early on due to swollen feet, chafing, a forming blood blister, resisting the urge to take off his shoes, walking at about 20 minutes per mile initially.
He describes the long stretches of being alone, calling it an eternal ruck, under a black dome sky filled with starlight, just his hot breath and the burning blister for company. Sounds incredibly isolating.
Then other runners started to catch up, a swarm arriving around mile 110. At mile 122, his crew chief, Kate, told him that Scott Jurek, a legendary elite ultra runner, was only 2 miles behind him.
Which surprised Goggins, right? Because he hadn't been running much. Made him realize his time must actually be pretty damn good.
He attributes his ability to cover ground so efficiently, even while power hiking, to his time doing nylon rucks in the SEALs. That training gave him a swift and incredibly strong power hiking stride, allowing him to maintain a pace of around 15 minutes per mile, even late in the race.
He concludes that the extreme heat in Death Valley was the great equalizer. It slowed down even the fastest runners, and his combination of sheer endurance and powerful hiking paid off.
Having conquered ultra-endurance, Goggins then returns to seeking challenges within the military, aiming for elite schools. He attends Ranger School.
Describing it as a hellacious special forces school, he focuses on the Florida phase, a 10-day field training exercise involving navigating the Panhandle swamplands.
Sounds miserable.
Oh yeah. Static line jumps into freezing water, wading through swamps, swimming, using rope bridges, constant threat of hypothermia. He emphasizes his internal commitment to never showing weakness, even when struggling. Instead, he focused on giving courage to other struggling men crossing a freezing river 6 times to help pull rope, assisting with rope bridges.
The physical toll was immense, though. He lost a shocking 56 pounds.
56 pounds, looked like death, emaciated, struggling even with basic PT.
He recounts this powerful, almost surreal moment in the chow hall after the final FTX. Despite being lactose intolerant for years, he desperately craved milk.
And he found a machine dispensing spoiled, chunky milk, but drank it anyway.
Yeah.
Describing this profound sense of gratitude for even that cold glass of spoiled milk, it's a striking illustration of how extreme suffering can just warp your perspective, create gratitude for the most basic things. He also received the Enlisted Honor Man certificate, highlighting his performance despite the struggle.
The day of his Ranger School graduation, he flew directly to Coronado to rejoin the SEALs, seeing the lack of lag time as an opportunity to be uncommon, always pushing.
He was immediately put in charge of physical training in his second platoon, initially enthusiastic about getting them ready for Iraq, planning what he calls evil shit workouts. His standard was high, living the SEAL ethos, earning the trident every single day through continuous effort.
But the platoon resisted his intensity. Attendance flagged. His OIC-in-chief told him his training was stupid, that they aren't in BDS anymore.
Yeah, they preferred doing their own workouts, Jim, getting big, not wanting to be punished or pushed to Goggins' extreme standard of continuous suffering.
This resistance led to significant disappointment for Goggins, a loss of respect for his leadership. He contrasts their mindset with the Ranger School ethos, where rank was irrelevant. Everyone started as maggots reborn at 0.
Right. No past, no future, only the present challenge. He holds that belief. You're either getting better or worse. After celebrating a win, you need to dial it down, dream up new training regimens, new goals, and start at 0 again.
His disappointment led him to double down on his own workouts, ramping them up even harder. He admits he did this partly to hurt their fucking feelings.
Which he acknowledges was a failure in his leadership. Losing situational awareness, not connecting with his men, trying to bull his way through instead of leading effectively. A moment of self-awareness there.
Undeterred by the issues in his SEAL platoon, he sets his sights on an even higher challenge, attempting Delta Force selection in the Appalachian Mountains.
Delta selection. He describes the initial ruck march, starting in the cold and very dark morning, 40-pound pack, taking off hot, leaving everyone behind, seeing it as another opportunity to be uncommon, finished 30 minutes early.
The selection involved advanced land navigation, reading terrain, not just maps identifying fingers and cuts, staying high, following water, drawing maps. He describes becoming incredibly skilled, feeling like a Black Daniel Boone.
By day 5, he was one of only about 30 guys left, rocking every test. But despite his success, the unthinkable happened. He got lost.
How?
Found himself on the wrong ridge while tracking power lines. Admits he turned his conscious mind off and started dreaming ahead about graduating, joining the elite unit. That crucial lapse in focus on the immediate task cost him dearly.
The source includes an interesting detail about the rumor mill within Delta selection, that the first ruck sets the baseline for all future navigation times.
Right. And in a later attempt, it's implied it was a second attempt. Knowing this, he could have played it safe on that first ruck. But he chose to go even harder to make sure they saw my very best, breaking his own course record.
There's an account from another participant describing Goggins looking intensely focused at the airport before selection, sensing he was one of the guys who'd be there at the end.
In what sounds like his final Delta attempt described in the source, he reached the second to last day, confident for the 40-mile final ruck, rocking every test. But he got lost again.
Same way.
Same way. Wrong ridge, tracking power lines, turning his conscious mind off, dreaming ahead. And this final mistake had a direct physical consequence. He strained his ankle just 2 days before the final test, which led to him getting cut from selection.
Wow. A brutal illustration of how, even at the highest level, losing focus on the immediate task, letting the mind drift, it can lead to failure and injury.
Definitely. Next, the source details a completely different, very public crucible, attempting to break the Guinness World Record for most pull-ups in 24 hours, setting the ambitious goal of 40-20 pull-ups in 17 hours.
And the purpose, again, was to raise money for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation.
Always that element. His first attempt was in New York City. The lead-up sounds chaotic. The SEALs brass almost stopped his planned appearance on the Today Show because of controversy around a different book. No easy day.
Right.
Goggins pushed back fiercely, arguing he wasn't talking operations or promoting himself. He was trying to raise $1 million for the families of fallen warriors, and the Today Show was the biggest platform.
But the attempt itself was a disaster.
Total disaster. The bar wasn't bolted properly, it was unstable, his hands got torn up early. He had to quit that first attempt.
So, like the failed San Diego Ultra, this public failure prompted a critical step, applying the military AAR process.
The after-action report. He calls it a live autopsy, essential for learning from mistakes in what was truly uncharted territory for him. He analyzed everything brutally.
What were the mistakes he identified?
Key ones. Going on the Today Show was a huge distraction. Prioritizing money over the task itself was a bad idea. He wasn't truly focused on the record, didn't respect it enough, thinking he could do it on a rusty bar. Overall, a lack of focus and attention to detail cost him. He also mentions the distraction of too many bubbly looky-loos asking for pictures, invading his necessary safe space of concentration.
So for the second attempt, he applied every lesson learned from that AAR.
Every single one. bar bolted solid, video crew recording every rep meticulously, hands taped perfectly, gloves right. He adopted a discipline strategy, aiming for a consistent 6 pull-ups per minute, refining his technique to barely clear the bar to minimize wasted movement, setting his water bottle on boxes with a straw so he didn't have to reach. He notes that first sip of water became a trigger for discipline.
He felt completely focused on game, confident, initially aiming for the full 24 hours, thinking 5,000 or even 6,000 pull-ups might be possible. But despite the meticulous preparation, the agony was immense.
Oh yeah. At the 12-hour mark, having done 3,000 pull-ups, he describes hitting headfirst into a wall. Exasperated, in agony, and my hands were starting to come apart again. He felt the crushing weight of failure and humiliation, and the moment transported him back to the sheer suffering of his third Hell Week.
The source talks here about the specific kind of strength required to be vulnerable, right? To put your ass on the line in public, working towards a dream that feels like it's slipping away with everyone watching.
Yeah, he speaks directly to the listener here, acknowledging, we all have eyeballs on us. Family, friends, colleagues, watching your aspirations. He notes that unsolicited advice often comes from people who care, who want you safe and comfortable. But that same concern can inadvertently smother your aspirations by discouraging you from facing potential pain and failure. But, he asserts, there is immense potential in those moments of pain and power there too if you have the mental fortitude to piece back together broken dreams and keep going.
The outcome of that second attempt was success. He set the Guinness World Record. 30 pull-ups in 17 hours.
Incredible achievement. He describes his state slumped in the ER waiting room afterward, holding a bloody glove that looked like it was from an O.J. Simpson crime scene.
Wow. His mom was there, and her simple words to him were, "You're going to do this again."
And he says she read his damn mind, because even in that state, he was already performing his internal AAR, finding treasure in this wreckage and leverage to be gained from the experience, already thinking about what was next, never satisfied.
This achievement and the mindset behind it lead into challenge, #9 in the source. Find more. It's addressed to what he calls unusual motherfuckers, and directly counters the idea that reaching a certain level of success or accomplishing a major goal means you've made it.
The source states unequivocally, you always have to find more. Greatness, he writes, evaporates like a flash of oil, requiring continuous conscious effort to maintain and build upon. The pull-up record, like becoming a SEAL or Ranger, wasn't an endpoint, just another step in the unending process of pushing limits.
This ongoing search for challenge and self-refinement is evident even after setting a world record. The source describes him running the Iceman 50K.
Yeah, a race in 0-degree Fahrenheit conditions on unplowed trails with snow and ice, wearing standard running shoes with cheap crampons that quickly broke.
Sounds awful. He details the physical hardship. Breaking trail through the snow, feet freezing, intense sweating causing severe chafing, underarms and chest cracking raspberry red, rashes. Yet, he notes the pain didn't register as intensely as you might expect because he felt this strange sense of liberation, like he was running free.
He even experienced a moment of tranquil space, feeling gratitude and appreciation surprisingly alongside the pain and discomfort.
It was after the Iceman race that he noticed familiar knots at the base of his neck and above his hip flexors, prompting him to question if his constant suffering and physical issues were linked to them. This led him back to advice he had previously dismissed.
Advice from Joe Hippensteel, a stretching expert he met through the SEAL community. Joe's background was as an undersized decathlete who pushed so hard on strength training that he caused severe injuries, including a torn hamstring, ending his Olympic dreams. This forced Joe to shift his training philosophy to balancing strength with extensive, painful stretching. Joe observed that his chronic pain vanished when he achieved a certain level of range of motion through stretching.
Goggins admits his initial disregard for Joe's advice, though. It required hundreds of hours of stretching, and at the time, Goggins was obsessed with strength and power, believing flexibility would somehow decrease his speed or force.
But his perspective changed dramatically after his autonomic nervous system dysfunction, ASD diagnosis, and heart surgery. He refers to it as gaining a view from my deathbed, which altered my perspective. Looking in the mirror, seeing the knot on his head, a side effect of the surgery, realizing he'd lost nearly 2 inches in height, having terrible range of motion. It made him finally ready to embrace Joe's approach.
He describes the sheer agony of starting Joe's stretches. Even simple postures like sitting Indian style, hips so tight his knees were by his ears, causing him to lose balance.
He details the intense pain. Cramps squeezed and pinched, sweat oozed. But he cycled through it, focusing on his breathing. Slowly, his body began to open up, the pain easing after an hour or two. Quad stretches felt like stretching steel cables, and he learned to stay in the posture until the pain reached a 7 to 10 on a scale of 10.
His dedication to this stretching regimen was extreme, mirroring his approach to everything else. 2 hours on day 1, 6 full hours on day 2.
Eventually, he was stretching for upwards of 12 hours a day, structuring it around his work schedule, waking up early, stretching before work, at his desk, during lunch, after work until bedtime. Just incredible commitment.
The results, he writes, were transformative. Significantly better range of motion, less pain and injury, stopped getting stress fractures after years of constant shin issues, got sick far less often, even felt smarter than I've ever been.
A stark contrast to his previous mindset of tape it up and move the fuck on when injured. He emphasizes that at 43, he's in better shape than he was in his 20s, and crucially, he is still getting after it.
The source also mentions his volunteer work fighting wildfires as another example of intentionally placing himself in difficult, physically demanding situations.
Yeah, digging fire lines on 45-degree slopes at 10,000 feet, the inherent danger, like a tree nearly hitting a teammate, the constant smell of smoke, all part of his commitment to finding discomfort and pushing himself.
Reflecting on his journey, the source highlights the importance of people who shared his path or inspired him, illustrating the principle that iron sharpens iron.
Right. He uses examples like Sledge, a fellow SEAL who transformed from a heavy drinker to a dedicated triathlete and cyclist, and Sean Dobbs, the officer who quit Hell Week but went on to become an Ironman and accomplished officer, demonstrating how owning a past failure can be a catalyst for future growth.
He thanks these individuals and others mentioned in the acknowledgments: Jennifer Kish, who helped structure the book, Stephen Sheljo, the recruiter, Bill Brown, Drew Sheets, Kenny Bigby, battle buddies, and Sean Dobbs for sharing his story.
There's a particularly poignant moment he shares too. Driving to Indianapolis to be with his brother after his brother's daughter was murdered. He notes how in that moment of shared grief and tragedy, all of our bullshit issues no longer mattered. A reminder of the gravity of real-world suffering outside of the self-imposed kind.
The theme of overcoming external doubt is revisited too. He recounts how people doubted him relentlessly when he set ambitious goals like losing 106 pounds, offering weak-ass dialogue like, "Don't expect too much."
He acknowledges this doubt fed his own self-doubt but ultimately served as fuel. He addresses the listener directly about this common experience, others projecting their own limitations onto your aspirations, often out of misguided care.
He acknowledges the inherent cost of living this way. There is no end to it. When you commit to constantly seeking discomfort and pushing your boundaries, you are perpetually nose to concrete with your own bullshit limits you didn't even know were there.
It requires a continuous willingness to do the painful work, break those limits down, change, accepting pain as the necessary process to further callous the mind.
The question, "What am I capable of?" first asked after a marathon and answered by legendary ultra-runner Carl Meltzer, is tied into his entire journey. It reinforces that core idea that there is always a whole other level and much more in us than we know.
For endurance, whether physical or mental, changing the mind, shedding old identities, consistently making the extra effort, it allows one to achieve feats once thought impossible.
The concept of image creation is also central, the idea that we're only capable of living up to the image we create for ourselves. The cookie jar, in this context, serves as a tool to constantly reinforce and remind us who the fuck we are when we are at our best, drawing on those past moments to fuel the present fight.
The source briefly touches on what he calls Goggins' laws of nature, emphasizing the need to prepare yourself because life is inherently hard, not always fair. A counter to the tendency to feel sorry for ourselves when faced with adversity.
Reflecting on his path through elite training, BDS, Ranger, Delta attempts,
Yeah.
he concludes he was uncommon even among the uncommon,
Yep.
and made a conscious decision to separate myself even more by always seeking the next level of challenge, never becoming complacent.
The power in vulnerability is highlighted. Again, the strength required to be vulnerable, put yourself out there publicly, accepting the risk of failure, and the belief that there's potential power in those moments of intense pain and seemingly broken dreams if you have the will to piece them back together and learn.
Ultimately, the source brings it back to the core message. Mindset is everything. He views life as one big mind game, and fundamentally, the only person you are playing against is yourself.
His strategies, he emphasizes, work not just through sheer willpower, but because he relentlessly puts in the work. It is, as he states, a lot more than mind over matter.
It's about understanding that unlocking that whole other life that's just waiting for you requires relentless self-discipline, consistently seeking out discomfort, scheduling suffering day after day.
So we've really taken a deep dive into a truly extraordinary journey, haven't we? From a childhood defined by abuse, fear, struggle, through the punishing demands of elite military training, into the world of ultra-endurance and record-breaking attempts. It's quite something.
It really is. We've unpacked the key concepts from the source.
Yeah.
The brutal, necessary honesty of the accountability mirror. The profound resilience built by forging a callous mind through repeated hardship.
The essential fuel found by drawing on past successes in the cookie jar, and the philosophy of pushing far beyond that comfortable perceived 40% limit through sheer relentless discipline.
And these aren't just abstract ideas or techniques solely for aspiring Navy SEALs or ultra runners, are they? As presented in this source, they're principles about managing your own mind, confronting your own fears and insecurities, and pushing your own perceived limits, whatever those might be in your work, your learning, relationships, personal goals.
Yeah, the source directly challenges you, the listener, to look at your bullshit limits and ask yourself if you are truly willing to do the uncomfortable, painful work required to break them down.
Remember, as the source tells us, motivation is fleeting. Discipline is the key to actually rewiring your brain, building that mental callus, and consistently finding more within yourself than you thought possible. Something to consider: how you might apply these principles to the challenges you face right now.
Definitely. And as you reflect on this deep dive into a truly uncommon path, maybe consider this final thought from the source material. When you truly commit to this life of relentless self-discipline and intentionally facing discomfort, there is no end to it. It's not a destination. It's a continuous process of finding more.
So ask yourself, are you truly ready for a life where there is no finish line?